Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Dia.
Thank
It's
you.
truly my honor and privilege to be able to present here today at the Forever Jung conference. My relationship with Jung, as it were, goes way back, long before I even was, contemplating becoming a PhD. I before I came to the California Institute of Integral Studies, and before I went to Saybrook to get my PhD in psychology, I obtained an MFA from John F. Kennedy University in Berkeley. And that they had a School of Holistic Studies then that had an amazing, small but very vibrant art program that was giving out the MFA degree. And it was heavily informed by Jungian alchemy, actually. Merriam-Webster is this wonderful artist who taught the alchemy course when I was there, and it was based on the book by Edward Edinger, Anatomy of the Psyche. And I was just blown away by the psychological and artistic utility of the alchemical sequence, which Carl Jung was so enamored of, as a way to deepen connections with both the self and society. So I ended up doing a one-man show on mass incarceration that somehow evolved out of this very, abstruse way of looking at psychology. But I really did hang on to it during my PhD program. And so that's what I want to talk about today is my doctoral work. So the presentation is a Mandala for mutual aid, a post-Jungian approach to ethnosexual mythology. Yeah, I want to say that I was kind of apprehensive on whether or not I should call it post-Jungian, given that this is very much a Jungian conference. I don't think of it really as being a distancing term from Jung. I know there's been a lot of controversies with Andrew Samuels and so forth around that term, but I choose to think of it more as just having a warm embrace, but also an evolution that incorporates, cultural aspects to the analytical psychology framework. So that's the position that I'm coming out of. So what I want to talk briefly about today comes in three parts. Part one is taking a look at the phantom narrative concept from Samuel Kimbles, as well as looking at The Wounded Researcher by Robert Romanyshyn. I had an amazing synchronicity around Romanyshyn when doing the doctoral work. But also, I want to firmly ground the talk in a specific ethnosexual mythology, the one that is from Kemet, the mythology of Auset and Asar, also known by their Greek names, Isis and Osiris. For part two, I want to take a specific look at the doctoral work itself. The theme there is decolonizing psychological research through Black creativity. And then finally, I want to move into a call for an Afrofuturistic turn in analytical psychology. So let's plunge right into it. Samuel Kimbles, many of you may be aware, brought the concept of the cultural complex into analytical psychology. This was a turn in analytical psychology towards looking at culture as a major factor in conditioning the unconscious. So you'll know that a complex is a charged series of images and our thoughts that gather around a particular idea or experience. And much of the psychoanalytic process is about unpacking complexes. And so for most of the life of that idea, it's been thought of in individualistic terms, but there's been a felt need to socialize the concept to make it applicable to groups, since groups do so much to impact psychological development of individuals. So I would like to read some from the dissertation about my thoughts about the phantom narratives and how they relate to the work that I was doing. In humanity's earliest cultures, artistry was inseparable from spirituality and healing. Tribal shamans would journey to the spirit world to encounter the unseen spirits behind the afflictions, whether physical or political, of the ill. They would use creative means such as storytelling, singing, and drumming to construct and conduct those spiritual journeys. These journeys promoted psychological healing through two types of activities: anamnesis, or recovery of the past, and active imagination, or projection of the future. Thus, the artist shaman was both psychopomp, or a guide to the dead past, and hypnopomp, or an awakener of the imagined future. In this study, I functioned as both psychopomp because I guided the co-researchers through spiritual narratives and rituals from the ancient past, and hypnopomp because many of the ideas for this study occurred to me as I lay in bed preparing to awake in the morning. Like the artist shamans of old, the co-researchers used creative means to fight spiritual battles that identified the unseen forces that afflicted our lives, cultural complexes, and their phantom narratives. Cultural complexes generate phantom narratives, which may be transformed into aesthetic tools for their dismantling. Kimbles, an African American Jungian psychoanalyst, said that intergenerational processes are manifested as phantom narratives that provide structure, representation, and continuity for unresolved or unworked through grief and violence that occurred in prior historical cultural contexts that continues into the present. He wrote that phantom narratives may seem to be some unnecessarily redolent to popular dramatic depictions of the shadow in comic books and musical comedies, and not psychoanalytic enough. But this terminology is in accord with Jung's recommendations for a language that will actually do justice to the way the psychic self conceives its processes. In describing the living processes of the psyche, I deliberately and consciously give preference to a dramatic, mythological way of thinking and speaking, because this is not only more expressive, but also more exact than an abstract scientific terminology. The term was Kimball's attempt to make the interrelationship of cultural and personal shadow in the unconscious of both individuals and groups more explicit. Kimball said phantom narratives help constellate cultural complexes in three ways. One, intergenerational transmissions. Two, collective shadow processes. And three, socially shared suffering. I contend that the mythology of Isis and Osiris is the ultimate phantom narrative because it is about all three of these processes and it embodies all three processes in relation to a Western civilization that does not acknowledge it as a foundational element of European culture. Phantom narratives thus refer to both the potential space that is created by an attitude toward the cultural unconscious that holds and expresses the active historical dynamics that were formative in the creation of a group's identity. These dynamics are the shared events and experiences that are narrated through ritual, stories, and priorities in the present. The unthought unknowns forming a part of the narrative structure of the cultural unconscious. Phantoms like this contribute to the generational transmission of collective identity through the memory of shared events and the use of rituals and cultural narratives. Indeed, in this study, the mythology of Isis and Osiris enabled a group of men of African descent who experienced same-sex desire, Moad Wesed, artists, to accept the intergenerational transmission of its knowledge, to process the collective shadow represented by our initial awareness of working with each other, and to share socially the suffering of racism and homophobia. Phantom narratives highlight how cultural complexes operate silently in the background, shaping perceptions and behavior of groups and individuals in groups. They are similar to what social psychologists call the internal working models and the associated implicit attitudes, implicit associations, and implicit working memory. Noted the similarities between these concepts from cognitive neuroscience and Jungian theories about complexes, archetypes, and the self. Recognizing the phantomatic cores of cultural complexes permits us to see how the past manifests in the present, helping us to envision new possibilities. It also allows us to recognize collective introjections, or the tendency to identify with the perceptions of negative attitudes held by the culture towards one's identity group. Acknowledging cultural complexes and the phantom narratives that transmit their unconscious ideologies is one step in a process of the development of a consciousness in the collective that can begin to process its essential collectivity. And we'll see how this played itself out through the artwork that the co-researchers did in the research study. Um, I'd now like to turn my attention to Robert Ruminishyn's The Wounded Researcher. Uh, yeah, it was interesting. I had been wanting to read this book long before I did my dissertation, and then it actually didn't quite happen until after the data collection process. And I was stunned to find, actually, that Romanishyn had done exactly for the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice what I had done for the myth of Isis and Osiris. It was almost exact. It was just really quite stunning to me. All the co-researchers were practicing what Romanishyn in his book, The Wounded Researcher, calls the poetics of research. A poetics of research makes neither research into poetry nor a researcher into poet. Rather, it deepens research and makes it richer by attending to the images in the ideas, the fantasies in the facts, the dreams in the reasons, the myths in the meanings, the archetypes in the arguments, and the complexes in the concepts. Doing so, research with soul in mind does something akin to a hymn of thanksgiving, in which the hymn in the work is an elegy of praise of refining what has been lost or acknowledging what has been ignored or neglected. It is a way of inviting the strangers in the work across the threshold of the temporary dwelling that the researcher, as a quote unquote failed poet, has built in order to give a place for the unfinished business of the soul of the work to tell its dreams and the vision of the work. For Romanishyn, research is inseparable from loss and mourning, so much so that he claimed the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice to be the archetype of research. The myth remained so popular in Western culture that it became the subject of the Broadway musical that Kamal, who was one of the co-researchers, attended. He made a trip to New York during the research data collection period to see Broadway. And he took in the musical Hadestown, which is based on the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Um, Romanishyn paralleled the research process to the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice in six steps, much like the way in which I parallel the myth of Isis and Osiris to the co-researchers' group sessions in six scrolls. But I'm not as interested in the similarities between Romanishyn's text and mine as I am in comparing the two myths as holistic experiential frameworks for research. Engaging in the poetics of research, the co-researchers diligently attended to the images, fantasies, dreams, myths, archetypes, and complexes in our lives and art. We chanted a hymn of thanksgiving in the church. We refound our African heritage and acknowledged queer, femme, and trans cultures ignored by the mainstream. We and our cultural archetypes began as strangers and ended as intimates. And we made a place for the unfinished business of consubstantiation, represented by our phantom narratives of isolation in our conversations with each other. But we did not part as failed poets. Rather, we parted as accomplished artists and empowered brothers who are wiser and happier for our collective journey through the underworld of our secrets. Perhaps this was because the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice emphasizes the psychopompic looking back, whereas the myth of Isis and Osiris emphasizes the hypnopompic looking forward. Like the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, the myth of Isis and Osiris is a tale of loss, mourning, and research. Isis literally searches twice for Osiris' body. Unlike the other myth, it is also a tale of rage, battle, and empowerment. The myth of Isis and Osiris does not counsel a fatalist acceptance of loss, but rather reclaiming one's birthright. It does not leave its hapless protagonist fragmented and beheaded, but rather chastised and venerated. The myth of Isis and Osiris, as a model of research, contains tragedy but does not romanticize it. It aims for a happy ending. Um, do, 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 do. I am not arguing that my mythology is better than Romanishyn's mythology. As the mythological stem cell of human civilization, however, the myth of Isis and Osiris gave birth to many of the world mythologies that appeared after it, including Christian mythology. The cultural complex about Western civilization's repression of Kemetic spirituality influenced Romanyshyn when he wrote, "The ego is not the center of the work. The work is not in the researcher any more than the dream is within a dreamer. On the contrary, the researcher is within the work. This shift describes an imaginal approach for the poetics of the research process. In this imaginal approach, the researcher has to die to the work so that the work can speak through him or her, so that the weight of history, that is the unfinished business in the soul of the work that claims a researcher through his or her complexes, might come through. A cultural melancholia for the loss of the Osirian resurrection cult is obvious here. Less obvious is the phantom narrative about the loss of consubstantiation as a central framework for understanding society. The idea of consubstantiation is that everything is inherently related to everything else. Romanyshyn's description of imaginal research presumes that the researcher is an individual, not a collective, and forecloses the possibility that the incoherent self is actually a weave of community. Romanyshyn imagined that the researcher is Orpheus, that the researcher's subject is Eurydice, and that the researcher and the subject are doomed to be forever out of each other's reach, and that only the death of the researcher's ego, in the form of acknowledgement of his complexes, will give voice to the subject. This is a rather morbid view of research. The ego is not the center of the work, but the ego's death is. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is the phantom narrative that never ends because it ends one complex only to replace it with another. Romantic love, doomed to end in tragedy. The mythic research values self-sacrifice of the I did it for love kind. This study represents an alternative framework for research based on the myth of Isis and Osiris. I view the researcher as a participant in a collective. Each co-researcher has a self that is made of the selves of the other participants. Each co-researcher embodies a particular cultural archetype, all of them and none of them, because each cultural archetype is a portrait of instinct heard as intuition, whose collective actions compose a tale that has been gifted to posterity as instructions for sociogenetic individuation. The ego is not the center of the work because the collective is. The co-researchers are within the work because the collective is the work. The myth of Isis and Osiris gives voice to the co-researchers because the co-researchers give voice to the myth, just in the same way that the ancestors give voice to the living because the living venerate the ancestors, which is what both the living and the yet unborn are destined to become. This is a joyful view of research. The ancestral cycle of life is the center of the work. The myth of Isis and Osiris is the phantom narrative that never ends because it ends one complex only to replace it with another. Familial love fated to produce a child. This mythic research values self-fulfillment of the we did it for our community kind. Before I move on, I just want to do a basic rundown of the Kemetic worldview, that is the ancient Egyptian worldview, as the illumination of the spirit. The cosmology that I'm going to be dealing with is the African cosmology. Its teleology is the African ancestral cycle of life, the notion that there's an ancestral spiritual world, there's the contemporary modern human world, and then there's the spirit world of the unborn, the new generation that's coming in. And this is all centered in the veneration of the person, specifically the veneration of the ancestors. The epistemology here is an inclusive metaphysics, which includes dream work, intuition, gut instincts, as well as rationality. The ontology here is human authenticity, being based in the realness of the personality, the realness of the personality's social circumstances. The axiology here is the cosmic order represented by Maat and the goddesses' moral values, including truth, justice, propriety, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and order. The methodology here is Sankofa praxis, going back and fetching your ancient African ancestral heritage, which, by the way, belongs to all of us globally, since our species originated in Africa. And ultimately, the aim of an African-centered psychology is the illumination of the spirit, to go well beyond, returning the client to, baseline functioning, but to actually have this person live life full out through the illumination of the spirit. Kemetic mythology very much believed in the idea of synchronicity. This was because the ancient worldview saw the external world as a manifestation of the internal world. Um, Kemetic mythology was also very much a progenitor or an exemplar of the active imagination. One could see through the earth, see into the earth, see what the earth required of you and was communicating to you because there was that interconnection between the inner world out in the outer world and the symbolic messages that the outer world was trying to communicate to you could be activated through the imagination. Finally, what exactly is the Kemetic mythology? Well, the basic story is that Isis and Osiris were the first queen and pharaoh of ancient Egypt. Osiris is killed by his brother Set in a jealous fit of rage. After learning Osiris has slept with his wife Nephthys, Set becomes a pharaoh. Isis uses magic to revive Osiris temporarily in order to have a child, Horus. Set discovers Osiris' dead body and tears it into 14 pieces. Horus battles Set for the throne of Kemet and eventually wins. Isis collects the pieces of Osiris' body and establishes a temple in his memory wherever a piece is found. In Freudian terms, Set can be seen as the id, Horus can be seen as the ego, and Isis Osiris can be seen as the superego. In Jungian terms, Set can be seen as the shadow. His wife Nephthys is the personal unconscious. Osiris can be seen as the collective unconscious. Isis can be seen as the anima and Horus as the animus. They are also, respectively, archetypes for the devil, the lover, the father, the mother, and the king. In African-centered psychology, the myth shows that the social disorder that results when the values of Ma'at are not honored, but that the key to restoring social order is ancestral veneration and Sankofa, which allows us to remember those values. And I'm seeing this as the basis for what I'm calling a mandala for mutual aid. That artistic processes are also psychological processes, which are not merely individual, but profoundly social. And so the Jungian notion of the collective unconscious is something that cannot be easily discarded if we are to fully manifest a mentally healthy world. So how did I operationalize all this heady stuff? It was through my doctoral work, which was a mixed method qualitative study that combined arts-based inquiry, autoethnography, and participatory action research. I met together with four Moad Wested artists for 6 weeks, and ultimately we had gathered to make art about Isis and Osiris, but what we ultimately discovered was that Isis and Osiris, through their mythology, had already made art about us. But through this, we discovered the power of consubstantiation, and the ultimate bottom line for the dissertation wasn't so much a deconstruction of class, race, sexuality, and gender, as it was the sheer joy of our togetherness. And it's my belief that that is what is going to form the basis for the living, breathing mandala of mutual aid that helps us break the shackles of the shadow and move into what Jung called the conjunctio, the alchemical conjunctio, the society based on the mystical marriage of the opposites. Which had a place for all. So let's take a look at the dissertation as a force for the decolonization of psychology. Right. My research question was, what does an arts-based alchemical project reveal about the liberation of men of African descent who experience same-sex desire from the psychology of colonialism? Yeah, I've already told you what the basic nature of the project was. I gathered four artists, a poet, a singer, a painter, and a video director to make art about the myth of Isis and Osiris. The myth served as a stand-in for the embrace of our African cultural heritage. while we had deep and meaningful conversations about the impact of colonialism on our lives and communities. So yes, the literature review was divided into four parts, reclaiming alchemy. You'll recall that Jung was absolutely obsessed with alchemy. He found in it the historical precursor for his own ideas on individuation. And the word alchemy itself is Arabic for from the Black Land or from the land of the blacks, which is a direct reference to ancient Egypt. Kemet is the what the ancient Egyptians called their land. So yes, alchemy was originally based in the burial rites for the ancient Egyptian pharaohs. Rejecting colonialism, liberating mythology, and centering Moad Wesed were the other three themes of the literature review. Liberating mythology may seem to be a weird title for a section of the literature review, but actually it really was a liberation of the mythology itself, because what I came to discover was that the ultimate framework for the study, if you will, was actually the mythology of Isis and Osiris itself. That the myth itself contains a complete explanation of human culture and human psychology. And so, therefore, I was able to explain everything that went on in the doctoral work through the mythology, something that I think Jung would ultimately be very approving of. So, in addition to Jung, the other major theorist I was working with was the Caribbean psychiatrist Frantz Fanon, very famous for joining the after heading up the largest insane asylum in Algeria. That process allowed him to see the effects of the French occupation of Algeria on the Algerian natives, and so he decides to join the militant opposition to get the French out of Algeria. And then, of course, also informed by Samuel Kimbles and Robert Romanyshyn. Yes, okay. The main, one of the main driving methods of the methodology was participatory action research, which is a democratic approach to research in which the lead researcher shares decision-making power about how the research will unfold with the research participants, who are always referred to as co-researchers. It was further informed by Black emancipatory action research, which emphasized structural racialization, intersectionality in the social construction of knowledge, the development of critical consciousness, and love healing and a commitment to social justice. The procedure was simple. We met on Saturday mornings for 6 weeks to discuss the art we made, and also to collaborate on the final piece of art, the collaborative work of art, which was a music video based on Isis and Osiris. The data I collected included interviews, journals, the artworks, and transcripts of the meetings that we had. My data analysis produced biographical descriptions, tables of codes, an autoethnography that described everything that went on in a literary narrative during the data collection process. And ultimately, what I came to a conclusion about was that while Jung and Fanon were very much informing what I was doing, the mythology itself of Isis and Osiris was really the true framework, the true explanation for everything that went on. So in making that shift, I'm moving towards an indigenous psychology, which says that the cultural means of the culture itself are best able to explain the psychology of a people. So data presentation. My table of codes were uh, sectioned according to plot elements in the mythology. So the table of codes were presented as an ethnosexual mythology. I'm calling the myth of Isis and Osiris an ethnosexual mythology because it's very much informed by African values and sexual acts from Osiris sexual misconduct to Isis magic to reanimate Osiris for the purposes of conception and childbearing, to the fact that Isis never recovers the phallus when she's gathering up the pieces of Osiris' body. There's a sexual theme throughout the myth, which is appropriate, for an origin myth, I think. So that's why I'm calling it an ethnosexual mythology. Anyways, so the autoethnography I generated was also multimedia conceptual art, since it included all of the poetry, the music, the paintings, and the video. Yes, and I also spent time on rehearsing the need for an ethical hermeneutics, since I was dealing with a population that deals with oppression and stereotypes. Decolonizing science. What am I talking about when I'm calling for that? The colonizing model of science dictates that isolated researchers produce generalizable knowledge by measuring data that can be reduced to objective findings. This model emphasizes individual genius. The decolonizing model of science suggests that groups of researchers collaborate on specific actions by contextualizing data that can be expanded to creative results. This model emphasizes group spirit, and so my doctoral work was very much on this decolonizing model. So let's get into the Black creativity that the co-researchers produced. Uh, right. Okay, to bring it back to the ethnosexual mythology, the four co-researchers' story was facilitated by our collective praxis, which consisted of activities that encouraged self-care, facilitated self-disclosure, and resulted in group bonding. Our death of Osiris, or artistic creativity, revealed that Moa Dwesed can produce a culturally meaningful work of art within 6 weeks, such as our music video. The magic of Isis, or alchemy, revealed that Moa Dwesed can move through a healing process that resonates with the concerns of the larger world. Our birth of Horus, or Moa Dwesed, revealed that we can work together and support each other to create positive experiences that heal our lives and strengthen our culture. Our battle with Set, or decolonization, revealed that we are cultural agents who are aware of our subjugation by neo-colonialist regimes and can actively use our power to resist and defeat them. So here we really do see all the dimensions of this living, breathing mandala for mutual aid that I'm talking about. So let's just get into the artwork. David was a painter, and so the painting on the left depicts his years as a corporate executive. It references the famous slave photograph on the right. Basically, you'll see underneath the painted suit here are scars. And so he's suggesting that, in the corporate world, you aren't, always allowed to reveal, who you truly are and the pain that you have been through. David, when he was contemplating the mythology of Osiris, wondered what it might have been like for Africans who were royals in their home cultures to be reduced to slave by the Mafa, or the Middle Passage, the slave ships that came to the Americas. And so here is his depiction of Osiris turned into a slave. And you'll notice the details, the shackles around the neck, the golden hood, of course, but then also little nooses hanging on the ends of the tree roots. So this is, mythological symbolism around, the roots of African Americans. This was an exciting moment in the data collection because I was able to capture the exact moment when David first had the creative spark for a new creative idea. He was very concerned, all of the co-researchers were very concerned about the plight of African American women, and he wanted to honor that particular feminist history by creating a painting that depicted these Black mammy figures floating on gigantic lily pads in this swamp, actually. And this pays homage to the ability of Black women to create and nurture the miracle of life underneath the most oppressive conditions. This idea the spark of the imagination actually became a full-fledged painting, which is now hanging up in a law library. Richard, our video artist, related a story about as a young man, watching a group of men, play basketball, a pickup game on a neighborhood court, and of course this gets him a little bit, hot under the collar, and so he decides he's going to visit a local adult store to buy some pornography, and so he does so. He buys some titles that featured white gay men and also some titles that featured black gay men. And he discovered that the white gay men were depicted as boy next door types who were having more or less romantic sex, but that the black gay men were depicted as ghetto thugs who were having very violent sex. And so he created this storyboard about that narrative as a way of deconstructing colonized narratives about gay black male sexuality. Uh, yeah, I've been warned not to play audio for lag reasons here, so I don't want to complicate the presentation too much. But Kamal generated two really beautiful songs. One was a love song to, demonstrate the deep feeling nature of love between two black men, and he also created a protest song. Here we come. Well, there's a little bit of it. I was the poet of the group, and I wrote a poem about reclaiming your time in a way. It's time to stop serving those who do not serve us. It's time to stop trusting those who do not trust us. It's time to stop caring for those who do not care for us. It's time to stop loving those who do not love us. It's time to learn that sacrifice is not a virtue when the sacrifice is you. And then I actually wrote an epic poem based on the myth of Isis and Osiris and relating it to various circumstances of oppression and colonialism in my own life. But I also wanted to celebrate what the co-researchers were doing in the research. So I ended up writing these lines. It feels exactly right. The four of us fit with mathematical precision as if destiny itself had traveled along exact geographical coordinates to arrive at this time in this space. A poet, a musician, a painter, and a video maker. All of us men of African descent who experience same-sex desire, converse and converge around a small card table in the living room of an old house that is now the Center for Human Growth, a community center for LGBTQ mental health. The table is covered in white cloth. We lay our objects on the table. A photo of grandma and an ankh necklace, a lover's diary and a crown pendant, a cell phone with schoolboy portraits and a guitar. We talk about art and alchemy in ancient Egypt and decolonization. The table rises because our words build a temple. This began as a research study, but we make it a revolution. So yeah. Um, I don't have enough time to go into all the conversations that we had, but it was deep, it was passionate, it was freewheeling about everything from, royalty to protest culture to pornography. To family relationships and religion. Kamal made these remarks. Whenever I'm around Black folk, it gets real, and I appreciate Black folk and Black queer folk for having real discussions. Oh. Yes, so this is our video. And in the video, Richard would put in kaleidoscopic elements. And this particular image made me think of Mandala. And of course, there's a long history of mandala-based artwork being very important aspect of, psychoanalysis and, Jungian, of Jungian symbolism in psychoanalysis. It was interesting that there were exactly 4 research participants, including myself. So our quaternity here, was living and breathing and represented in the flesh. This is me giving a sun salute at the top of the grand staircase that was the setting for the video. We also shot some of the video in the backyard of the community center where we conducted our meetings. This is an attempt to replicate the famous drawing of the Osiris coffin with wheat growing out of it. That's Ivy against the wall and me in those Osiris pose. This is me, fooling around, walking like an Egyptian. But later, this became meaningful because I think I was unconsciously embodying the uraeus, which is the snake symbol that is the symbol of the pharaoh's divine power. This is me giving a libation to the ancestors with some plants in the backyard of the community center. Yeah, this is a down shot of the grand spiral staircase with two of the research participants performing a song and the other, providing light for the singer. Yeah, I'm not able to show the actual video because of confidentiality reasons. This is an upshot of the roof of the place that we found, which actually had golden pyramids on it. Yes. And then this was the ultimate synchronicity I felt of the artwork. I was going through the kaleidoscopic elements of the video. And I was of course, I was looking for the prettiest, pictures to put into the dissertation. And I literally went frame by frame through the kaleidoscopic element that was based on that roof shot that I just showed you. And my jaw just dropped when I came across this image. You'll see that it has this kind of dark golden circle in the middle, and I think that's easily read as solar symbolism. But then there's also this oval in the center, which is very much eye-shaped, and then there's another vertical oval in the middle of it, so that it gives the appearance of being a snake eye at the center of the solar disk. And if you're familiar with ancient Egyptian mythology, you'll know that the ultimate sun god was Ra, and he was also a snake god. So I believe this is a synchronicity in which the collective unconscious delivered the ancient Egyptian sun god Ra directly into the video. Yeah, this Jungian stuff still works. Great. So I want to close the presentation by calling for an Afrofuturistic turn for analytical psychology. Um, Before I kind of get into the specifics of that, I want to reground the work in both uh, Jungian concepts and Fanonian concepts. And so I'm doing this through this idea of mythology as a sociogenic individuation story. Now, the myth of Isis and Osiris is not directly about individuation, but we have to remember the original context for the myth, which is that it's being celebrated in person, recited in person to a group of people. And so what is meant to happen there is actually the individuation of the people who are gathered there in the group. Because by discussing the symbolism, using your active imagination to analyze the myth, you're seeing the gods in the myth, enact social problems that may or may not be close to yours, but that resemble yours. But you're also seeing the gods represent, inner qualities that give you the power to actually rise to the occasion of dealing with those social problems. So the individuation that happens through the encountering of the myth happens in a social group context. And so that's why the myth is a sociogenic individuation story. It's individuation that occurs through a sociogenic context. I also want to pay homage to the group spirit, and this comes through in the idea of mythology as methodology. I certainly want to, give a shout out to ACOM, who was the guy behind Black Emancipatory Action Research, because the research did embody structural racialization, intersectionality, critical consciousness, and love healing, and a commitment to social justice. And it also embodied, various creative modes of autoethnography to fully activate the mandala for mutual aid, including descriptive realistic writing, confessional emotive, analytical interpretive, and imaginative creative, active imagination, if you will. And by invoking all of that and using all of that, what I found was that I myself, as the individual lead researcher, didn't need to have the answer for everything, didn't need to govern and call the shots for everything, that other members of the group would often come up with something better than I would. So I remember famously, two of the artists were supposed to come in with artwork for us to discuss, but they didn't do that. So that left a big hole, in my plans for what to discuss during the data collection that day. And it turns out that gap of space created the room for this freewheeling discussion on religion. And it was so much better than anything I could have come up with myself. So there's something that, in activating this Kemetic mythology, activates the group's spirit and helps you to get the work of the research done. So yes, the chief surprise of this study was that the decolonization of Moad Wesset is less about the deconstruction of classism, racism, sexism, and homophobia, and more about the celebration of our togetherness. Through this discussion, I have learned that the deeper dimension of that togetherness, consubstantiation, the whole is written in every part, and the part is written in every whole. Spirit is DNA, and DNA is spirit. Consubstantiation is what powers the love of Moad Wesset for ourselves and our people. No colonizer can minoritize, problematize, or generalize our love because our love is just for us. Right. So then here, I do go into a critique of postmodernism, which is basically saying that I think the reason we've been encountering so many troubles of late in terms of advancing a postmodernist cultural agenda, is that it's based on this false idea of reducing people to categories. And instead, what we need to do is turn to mythologies that realize that humanity needs to be identified in terms of other people, namely the ancestors, and also spirit itself. Basic to the idea of African-centered psychology is that humanity cannot be separated from spirituality, that a human is a spirit who's, remanifesting, the will of the ancestors. And I think once we base our identity not in categories, but in our ancestral inheritance and in our spiritness, we will then finally begin to manifest a lasting social justice. And in order to do that, we have to engage in Sankofa praxis, meaning embracing our African heritage. And as I suggested before, because Homo sapiens originated in Africa, we are ultimately all African. Right. So yes. Right. Theoretical considerations for science going forward. We needed an epistemology that is rooted in a notion of the extended self, meaning that the ancestral cycle of life, the ancestors and the unborn need to be accounted for in addition to, ordinary, regular human life. We need to acknowledge the group or social aspect of contemplation and evaluation, determining truth through a group process. Our ontology, it needs to include advocacy and subjectivity. It can't just be about a distance objectivity. And we need to make room for serendipity and unpredictability. I'm not so sure, especially in the social science context, how far we're going to get with studies that are solely concerned with control control, and prediction. Methodology. We need to make our knowledge production collective, including the dissertation process, which, as we all know, is a very individualist, lonely, isolated kind of process. Why aren't we involving groups in in knowledge production and training groups to produce knowledge? And ultimately, I'm really concerned with specifiability rather than generalizability, uniqueness, and fit. How do we get a science that changes the here and now, rather than merely observing it? And then teleology. We need to be in service of creativity, creating novelty, a useful a novelty, not just merely observing and replicating what's there, but creating. What is there, nurturing and cultivating what is there, nurturing that ancestral cycle of life. And ultimately, this requires the decolonization of science and a re-emphasis on social change. I know at this particular moment in time, this is going to run into some serious headwinds, but ultimately, that is what this project was all about. And I want to encourage analytical psychology to take deeply into heart, the power of ethnosexual mythology to become the liberating template for an embodied mandala for mutual aid that helps get us closer to the mystical marriage, the conjunctio that creates the world that we all want.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Butterfly. That was amazing. I would love to have a little bit of spaciousness for questions in the physical room as well as the online room. If there isn't, if there is any, Ray, I'm checking in with you.
Yeah, do we?
I have a question.
Oh,
Uh,
wonderful, Nisha, come on in. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nisha. I loved your research. What a labor of love. It was so intricate and so soulful and so liberatory. And I went to Duquesne University where Romanyshyn went, and he came and did a lecture, and he was huge for my dissertation process, which was also an art space work of queer liberation.
oh, wow.
And
Awesome.
I think it's really interesting that you read his work after this whole process. Is that what?
Yeah, I felt so bad because I'd wanted to read it before. It had been a major book that was weighing heavily on my mind. And I didn't do it until after I had done the data collection. And when I finally read it, I was just blown away because I had already conceived, the way in which the autoethnography is structured is as a six steps. That's based on the plot elements and symbolism within the mythology. And so then I was blown away to see that Romanyshyn had done the exact same thing, for the Orpheus myth, six steps.
Synchronicity. Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, this is like, a major, synchronicity here. And so obviously I sort of had a different, cultural agenda and, took a different approach to modeling, the research process. But it was exactly the same kind of deep underlying, thought process. And so I was able to take what he had done, yeah, because it wasn't just the I forget what he's calling it, the soul of research or the practice of research. There was also another, I think six questions that he'd come up with, as a paradigm for the hermeneutics, actually, alchemical hermeneutics. So there's a section in the dissertation where I apply his alchemical or hermeneutics specifically to the work of our painter, and it just totally fit in. It just completely, illuminated what our painter was doing. So very, very helpful from that perspective. Oh, I have to say, I didn't tell my little story about finding the place to shoot the video. Um, Our musician said that there was a practice space at his university called the church, and that the roof was painted gold. And I had no better idea about where to do this video. So we went ahead and we did it there. But my jaw just dropped when I saw the space because it wasn't just a gold ceiling, it was golden pyramids on the ceiling. And then also, the stairs were white, the railings were black. And the undersides of the stairs were red. So these are the classic, alchemical colors, black, white, red, and gold. And I was just like, this is the perfect setting for this music video that we're doing. And of course, walking into this, I had no idea we would be doing a music video. Certainly had no idea that we would manifest, an alchemical healing temple, for the site of the work. So it's ultimately does pay tribute, to the work of Jung and his work on alchemy. And even though I'm distinguishing myself, from Romanyshyn, clearly, we're fellow travelers. The synchronicities, the collective unconscious, all of that was fully operant. And there's no way you can come away from my dissertation without realizing and acknowledging the power of the Jungian framework. Definitely.
Well, I just wanted to say because there's so many details and specific components of your work, but stepping
Hmm.
back, it almost brings tears to my eyes or like chills to hear you talk about the numerous synchronicities in this.
Oh
Like
gosh.
the one thing that really stands out to me from the wounded researcher is that the soul of the work claims the researcher,
Yes.
knowing that that research needs to come through that one researcher
Yeah.
to
I
honor your
had
ancestors, and
yes.
you were chosen, which is amazing.
Yes, yeah. The whole idea of the numinous, this whole thing felt. I actually, and I say this, the whole thing felt like a direct transmission from Isis, from the goddess Auset. The whole thing, because what was truly shocking to me was how much I loved the collecting the research, collecting the data. Actually, I was like literally on a high, and the whole thing felt charged with the numinous. The whole thing felt divine, and there were literally synchronicities, major synchronicities happening every single week, and I document that in the dissertation. So have no doubt that whatever your own process is, it can happen for you as well. Most definitely.
Wow, thank you so much, Nisha. And we think we have a question in the room, Ray.
It's more of a comment. I hope you
Oh,
all can actually hear me.
we can hear you wonderfully. Thank
Yes.
you.
So, two things. The one thing that came to mind, you said, is it Romanyshyn and what was it you said you hadn't read the Newman? What is it again? You hadn't read before you did your data collection?
He has a very wonderful book called The Wounded Researcher, and
Right. I have that
I'd meant
book.
to read. Yeah, I'd meant to read it, but had not read it. But I would have read it just for the title alone, right?
It's good you
Uh,
hadn't. It's good you hadn't because I don't think you were meant to see it or read it before your work was collected. And I'm
right.
sitting here thinking that I have the book. I ordered it like 2 or 3 years ago, but I haven't read it yet. It's sitting on my shelf. But I did, and the Isis and Osiris story was one of the very first things I ever taught when I started teaching college in 2004. In
Wow.
community college, I taught that story as an overlay to what would become later on with the Christian stories. I taught it as the
Right.
one that
Yes.
came well before that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking,
This wonderful
yeah,
article by Charles Finch where he kind of lays out all this stuff. It's called the Old Dark Myth or something, or the Old Dark Ages, or something like that. But he lays out all the affinities between Kemetic mythology, as the basis
right.
of Christianity. Yeah.
And of course, I could never get that deep into it because I'm dealing with students who are just being exposed to this information, who are very much out in the country, not understanding any of it. So I wanted to come at this from a side where they could see it or understand it or be amazed by it. And that was 21 years ago. So, or something like that,
Wow.
2004. So yeah. But okay, that I just wanted to say you definitely weren't meant to see the information before you actually collected your data, because then it wouldn't become a synchronicity.
Right.
Right. It
Right.
it had to come across as a synchronicity, so you couldn't see it before then. So it yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And
So
so I could
you,
write about it in the
yeah.
dissertation.
So you not seeing it before then is also a synchronicity. You see?
Say that
You
again.
you not seeing his data before then is a synchronicity itself,
Oh, yes,
and
indeed.
an amazing one.
Yeah, yes. I will say the whole thing felt guided. I got a very, deep feeling of that. The whole thing was divinely guided, absolutely. And certainly one of the major life lessons I've had to face is I'm a very energetic person. I'm a very impatient person, and everything done like yesterday, right? Uh, and
Yes.
every time I've had a major what is a polite word? Major downfall. It's because I was pressing too hard and was insisting on something happening, too soon. And so a major life lesson for me has been to be like, well, if something's not happening, maybe it just needs to not be happening, and you shouldn't really try to push the river. Stop forcing it. And I totally hear what you're saying. Yeah, I think the collective unconscious, or ISIS or Ma'at, whoever made an executive decision. Dr. Butterfly does not need to see the Romanishyn before the data collection. So
Yes.
yeah, definitely,
Wonderful.
definitely.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for your question. Thank you so much, Dr. Butterfly.